Hello everyone, and welcome back to season 3 of Sully's Open Conversation, the show that aims to have an unfamiliar conversation in a familiar environment. For our first episode of season 3, we are joined here with Helena.
Hey, you alright?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm really good.
So we've actually known each other for quite a while.
Around 10 years now. Feels like a long time.
Slightly
It's
strange,
crazy,
isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think, well, we kind of knew each other in like year 8, year
Yeah.
9, kind of
Yeah,
around
we
that
both
time,
had
didn't we?
similar social circles in
yeah.
school. You know.
And then I think it was in summer just gone.
Yeah.
I happened to be playing golf at the
With my dad.
golf. Yeah. Got into a conversation and then obviously was talking about all my experiences and then he kind of mentioned about some of the experiences that you've been through.
Yeah.
And then he mentioned your name and I was like, hold on.
Yeah, I know this girl.
Yeah.
And then
I think we'd actually spoken on Instagram
we did
very
that day,
recently before that as well. So yeah, Helena, I'll let you introduce yourself.
So my name's Helena. I'm a bodybuilder, might as well just put that out there. And I've also got borderline personality disorder, diagnosed officially 2016, but had it all my life. So, yeah.
That's you.
Not too bad.
And what is one positive thing that you have heard, seen or done recently?
So it's something that I live by every day. No matter what kind of a day I'm having, I try and look for at least one good thing in every day. And people try and think it has to be like a really important thing. Simply getting out of bed, no matter what the time, can be a good thing. Eating healthily can be a good thing. Making someone smile can be a good thing. So practicing gratitude, basically.
It's lovely,
Yeah.
and it kind of, it makes you present as well, doesn't it? It doesn't, and you're not hard on yourself for, oh, I didn't do this today, I didn't do that
Not
today.
dwelling on negatives.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and then you can appreciate what you've achieved.
Exactly, yep.
And I had a massive problem with doing that
Yes.
for a lot of
So did I, not just you. I think we all do, to be fair. We don't give ourselves enough credit.
Exactly.
Especially when we've gone through things like we've gone through and you think, why me, constantly, and I could do better. And it's like you're doing the best you can with what you've got. And that's all that matters. That's all that matters.
I love that. So for those that don't know you, and however much you want to kind of say, would you mind going through your experiences and what you've been through?
So I had a normal childhood, everything fine, you know, both parents, single child, so on my own. And then come 2012, Mum took me aside and said, look, I want to leave you, Dad. So that was stage 1. Then my only grandparent passed away. Then I went through a personal situation. I got attacked when I was 14. And then a few months after that, moved out of the house I lived in all my life. Now, it was after my attack that the school were made aware and the school noticed that massive things were happening with my mood, personality, just the way I was carrying myself. So then we went to the doctors, got denied by CAMHS, went back to the doctors, tried again for CAMHS, got denied. And then I ended up taking an overdose and cutting myself for the first time, like that my parents knew of me actually self-harming. And that's sort of what started me getting into, I finally was accepted to CAMHS. And that's where we opened up this whole of mental health and, oh, there's actually something wrong with you. Originally diagnosed anxiety, depression, tried to get on antidepressants at 14, 15. I didn't like them. The way they were making me feel was that I wasn't in control. I felt heavily sedated to the point that I literally couldn't do anything. And I was like, this is not okay. So I chose not to take them. Under CAMHS, went through sort of counselling, therapy, trying to figure things out. Eventually also diagnosed PTSD subsequent from my attack. And then that's when the ball started rolling in terms of, right, we need to get you onto therapy. Now, during this time, I'd stopped going to school. So school, because it was an atypical, 9 till 3 p.m. sort of thing, I was an insomniac at this point. Couldn't sleep because of the nightmares. I had quite bad night terrors. I would actually have to stay at my mum's and she'd stay up with me all night, like it was too much. So then what happened is it came to a point where I had to get better help. So it was about a year and a half into the journey at this point. I then ended up going private. So we luckily had health insurance, went private, saw a doctor there, and he said there's something more than just PTSD and depression here. Like, the things that you're showing aren't just depression, because once I'd sort of calmed down after the really traumatic year, I had then become in this little world of, I was depressed, but I was also able to fake being happy in public.
Yeah.
I was also having happy moments at times, but I was having these absolute crazy highs and then absolute
Slumps,
lows.
isn't it?
And I would have depression for, say, 90% of the time. But then that 10% of the time that I wasn't depressed, I would be so out there and it was manic that there was something more. So then we went to the Priory, did several tests, and then this would be about 4 years later at this point, then got the diagnosis of borderline. Now, even at the Priory, borderline was like not really spoken about. It was an unheard of thing. It was mainly called emotionally unstable. And I didn't like that term from day dot. And I was like, I might be emotionally unstable, but let's stick with borderline. I prefer that. Less of a smack in the face. So we don't want to go around to, hi, I'm emotionally unstable. I'm borderline, sounds better. So what happened was then did our own research into it, and then sort of things came out that it was so like unspoken of. Like, I'd never heard of it, my parents never heard of it, friends and family hadn't heard of it, and I was just like, so where do I go with this? So did whatever we could find online, and there was very little, but there was a little bit about how it's not just brain chemistry, it's how your brain was formed from early stages of life. So we thought about certain things of characteristics of me as a child, and when we looked at how I was as a child versus how I was as an adult, there were things that had stayed exactly the same. For instance, memory, sensitivity, a sensory overload in terms of noise, space, sound, even touch and things like that. So which was almost a bit like an autistic tendency as well. And from that, it's when we started to realise this has been something I've had my entire life.
Wow.
And evidently it didn't break and become a problem until I had the traumatic year, which when you're going through hormonal changes as well as a teenager, it's evident that something's going to go wrong. Then you throw in the mix of alcohol, drugs, suicidal tendencies and self-harming, and you get this very dangerous toxic mix of, I'm doing X, Y, and Z behind closed doors, but to your face, I look perfectly normal and innocent.
It's masking, isn't it?
Yeah. So went through a lot with myself and with like psychiatrists. I had psychiatry quite a lot, and that taught me that I have to give everyone a chance, because I didn't like some of what they were saying. And then there was one doctor that massively listened to what I said, and he was really the one that made me realise that I can accept who I am. And
massively change your perception, can't it?
And he was so nice, because he was very blunt, but he was very much like what a counsellor or a therapist should, in my opinion, should have done from the get-go, and made me realise, that you need to separate your feelings from the actions and from what's actually going on. Like, you're feeling how you're feeling, you are completely valid in that feeling, but you need to think about the rationality of what you're feeling.
Yeah.
You know,
I think it's so easy, and that's kind of what I've had to start to really identify, notice, understand, is that I have to be wary of my feelings. I have to be aware of them. I have to be able to understand them and actually feel them, because growing up, I just kind of tried to avoid it.
Yeah, you can't suppress them.
Yeah.
Especially like I've the way I describe it to people is that, you know, your feelings are here and my feelings are out here. Now, that's not to say that my feelings are more important, but it's that if you were to look at, well, for instance, when studies started to come out and more information was coming out, the one thing that I kept seeing repeatedly over and over is that a borderline in not just an episode, but in general, has the same emotional skin as a third-degree burn victim.
Wow.
And that came up years ago, and I've seen that since. And the point that they're trying to say is that the emotional skin, if you put emotions into a bubble, the emotional skin of a person with borderline is that sensitive that you do feel more than others. I've realised from early on, like I was 18, 19, crying in the middle of a high street sometimes because I was having an episode, or because I'd been pushed around by loads of people walking past me, and I felt beaten up almost. And for a second, I'd feel so, not just threatened, but so uneasy that I would have a breakdown. But this is before I'd worked on myself, so now I wouldn't do that. But in my worst period of time, it's like I'm 18, 19, crying in the middle of public. For what reason?
I think it's especially with the kind of emotional overload as well. It's like it's not understanding.
Yep, and a lot of people look at them and think you're a grown adult crying, and it's not that she's overwhelmed or she's upset. And that's when I really had to hit the nail on the head of like, I don't care what people think of me anymore.
Yeah, it's so
because
important.
I've got to live my life however I've got to live it. But also it's about education. And luckily, I would say in the 10 years I've been diagnosed with mental health, it has improved as well as come backwards in some sense, but a lot of it has improved, especially since lockdown, of people understanding, and I'm sure you'd see this with men's mental health as well, but accepting that people feel a certain way, regardless of what's happened or what you try and do for them. You can't change that. You can help them, but you can't physically turn that switch off in their head. You know, it's up to that person, but also it's up to where they are in their recovery.
Definitely.
You know,
definitely.
little did I know I was going to get put in recovery, and that was absolutely crazy. So I got diagnosed mid-2016, and I was actually put into recovery, I think it was about summer 2018.
Wow.
And that was a year and a half of going to the gym. But I remember saying to that doctor, and it was the same doctor that taught me about acceptance of myself, I said to him, how am I in recovery? I said, I didn't know you could get into recovery.
Yeah.
Like, that's impossible. You know, like, it's not cancer. I'm not in remission. Like, the stuff is still in my head. And he said, yeah, but the point is you're recognising your
You're aware
trip-ups.
of it.
You're
and,
aware.
yeah.
You're so aware of yourself
And you're able
now.
to manage it.
That's the thing.
That's where the overload comes from, really, is
Yep.
because like you don't understand or aware that it's happening,
Yeah.
and therefore you don't know how to manage it.
Yeah, the main thing was he said, like, I for a long time would argue with my mum when I had a breakdown because she would try and cotton wool me. I was trying to break out and drink my arse out, as a typical teenager would. And I would swear at her quite a lot, and my mum hates swearing, even if it's by accident, she doesn't like it. And it took me a long time to realise that when I call her a bitch over the phone, I have to apologise for that, even if I'm in an episode. Me being in an episode gives me no excuse to treat someone in such a way, let alone my mum.
Responsibility for your actions.
Exactly, and that's the key thing, because he said you're finding awareness for yourself, but also responsibility in terms of it's you and you've got to deal with it, but also you have the repercussions of the mistakes you made, whether they're impulsive mistakes through what I have as a borderline or just general mistakes as a human. And like with my mum, it made me realise that actually, like, the way I am has to be accepted, but I also have to accept fault for my decisions that I make in and out of an episode.
Yeah.
And that was a massive turning point for me in terms of realising, not just for me also, but that other people should have respect for me as a person.
Yeah.
And if they can't give me that respect and they don't understand that I deserve that respect in any capacity, then I shouldn't give them my
deserve your
energy.
time.
Exactly,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
It's so valuable after 10 years of, well, let's say 8 years of being very depressed. Now my time is so valuable because I didn't see myself making 18. I really didn't see myself making 21. Here I am at 25, and I had a lovely breakdown at Christmas because I was like, I'm actually 25.
What am I doing?
Yeah, this wasn't on the plan. Like, this shouldn't be here right now. But it gave me
It's
a lot.
amazing.
It gave me a lot to realise though that I've got so much to be thankful for now. But also, I started speaking only about borderline about 2 or 3 years ago. Oh no, we're in 23 now. So what, 5 years ago I started speaking about it. And when I came out, it was literally, I felt like I was, you know, coming out, and it was crazy because it was a weight lifted off my shoulders to think that I don't have to explain myself anymore because...
Or hide or mask.
Because on social media, I call myself borderline bikini girl. That might change because I might have outgrown my category, but I am borderline bikini girl, and I'm proud of it. And I have nothing not to be proud of. And people might look at my account and think, oh my God, she's mentally ill. Yes, I am mentally ill, and I'm proud of it.
That's amazing.
And we need to share that, because I think that from my experience of coming out with borderline 5 years into my journey, I met 2 people in the first 5 years that had borderline. Since my diagnosis, I can assure you I've had probably 20 come in my DM saying they've just been diagnosed. And then on top of that, I've got about 3 or 4 friends who were very close to me who've been diagnosed.
Wow.
And if they didn't know me, they wouldn't have known about borderline.
I'm speechless
But
because
that's
it's so interesting, because it's therefore a further awareness and
Yep.
understanding. Like,
Yep.
it's not just us being allowed to be ourselves and like not have to mask or anything
Yep.
like that, but it's actually allowing other people to understand
learning
themselves as
and
well.
Yep. And for me, like, the main thing was, it's not a handbook, but I'm lucky that I've been through the worst of it. Not the worst of what borderline can be at all, but in terms of my journey and my path,
experiences, yeah.
I went through the worst of it for 3 or 4 years, and I did everything you could have done. I self-harmed, I overdosed, I drank myself to death almost, I tried drugs, I, partied and did everything I could. And it didn't work, which was great, but also I had the hangovers and the day afters of all of those events. And I've learned what I needed to do to actually get back on track, and also what works for me might not work for someone else, but I've heard what works for other people. So whether it's medication or therapy, I know in a sense which route might be best for someone to try. Or for instance, if a doctor said to them try antidepressants because the GP says antidepressants, I'll say to that person, maybe perhaps suggest mood stabilizers, because for someone with borderline, a mood stabilizer is actually what we should be prescribed as opposed to an antidepressant.
Interesting.
Because the antidepressant has the side effects of suicide, a lot like suicidal thoughts.
Yeah, there's a lot of side effects.
Yeah, but there's so much science with borderline, because it's obviously mental health is the brain regardless, but with having, I can't remember which way around, we've got something enlarged, which is why our emotions are higher.
Right.
But because of those differences, it's a lot more complicated than just taking a pill and masking it.
Yeah.
Which is where the gym came in for me, because I didn't want to medicate like everyone else did. It wasn't what worked for me. I tried therapy, but I couldn't get up at 9 a.m. because that's what they wanted me to do, and I was like, I'm not doing it. So I gave up. But then I found the gym, and then the gym really saved my life. That's where things took off, definitely.
So what would you say the gym's done for you then? I mean, obviously,
yeah, it's
an immense amount.
Yeah, I mean, I was always kind of skinny. So on a physical side, I didn't actually realise, but I was almost anorexic. I was BMI of, I think, 14, 15. It was 13 at the time, I think, that was anorexic. So what happened was when the depression kicked in, and the parents divorced and whatever, I just stopped eating as a whole. When I got attacked, I didn't eat at all for about 2 or 3 months. And at 5'7", I was about 45 kilos, which is about 7 stone.
Wow.
Yeah. And I thought I was fine, and everyone else said, oh, you look fine. Like, you look great. I wish I could look like you. You're all skinny. Realistically, little did they know I was very ill.
Wow.
And if I'd carried on that way, it would have put me in hospital probably. Yeah. And it got to a point where I started noticing that people were bigger and I was very, very small. And it was when I noticed that my wrist was so small, I was like, I actually need to start eating. So I just started to eat more protein off the back of like some research. And then I went to the gym, did the atypical thing of being a cardio bunny at first, and then realised that's going to get me nowhere. So went and got a PT for a couple of block sessions, done that, and then the rest was history. I just started weight training from January 2017.
And was that like the first introduction? Because obviously, the only way that I got into the gym was I went with someone that knew exactly what they were doing. Otherwise, you walk into a gym, it's so intimidating.
It's horrible. So I went to just a leisure centre at first to do just basic cardio. To get I think I must have been 16. I get a day pass for like £4, and I was quite happy with that. But I was just doing the cardio stuff, and then I looked around. I was like, wait, there's a weight section. And I was like, I need to do that, but I'm not walking in there and looking like an idiot, because that would be even worse. So I ended up paying quite a lot of money for it, but I got a PT at Pure Gym, and that's when I started learning things. But even then, I didn't realise at the time, because I was so inexperienced, but I was actually doing the same thing with him every week. I didn't have a program or a plan, and this is when bodybuilding come into play, because I'd sort of learned the basics of squats and deadlifts, but then I wanted to do upper body and legs and stuff like that. So I ended up doing about a year of just solo on my own, and I was doing the same thing every time I went in. Got quite strong on my own, but not like amazingly. And that's when I saw this gym in Croydon, and I was like, do you know what, I actually want to go there. It looks really interesting, but it's scary because it's a bodybuilder's gym. It's people on gear, big beefy guys, like I might not fit in. So then I got a PT, went there, and that's when I learned a lot, and that's when I realised that actually this could be something that helps me massively. Like the mental health that I had prior to going to the gym wasn't too bad, like prior to weightlifting, it wasn't too bad. It had settled a bit, but I still didn't have anything to grip onto.
Purpose.
Yep.
Yeah.
With borderline, you have an addictive personality. Like it's really hard not to get addicted to anything. But with the gym, the endorphins, they don't lie when they say you get like a rush of endorphins, because I was going to the gym at 10 o'clock at night, leaving at midnight and feeling like it's 8 a.m. in the morning.
It's the adrenaline almost, isn't it?
Yeah.
It just I totally agree. It's just like it's revitalising, really, isn't it? It actually doesn't make you feel more tired. It makes you feel more alive and awake.
Yep, and it was exactly that though, and it made me realise, and it was so it was so rewarding because I would go in there thinking I'm not going to do anything today, like I'm not going to do well, and then the weights would either move the same as last week or get better, and it's like I'm actually doing something good here, like I'm achieving something.
Exactly.
And where I left school so early, I've got no GCSEs, so I felt like a failure in my life, which was great. And I was just like, this is something that's actually making me feel really good. And aside from all the bad choices I'd made in the past of like the drinking and the drugs, and as much as I had a good time with that at times, not all the time, but like when I went out to certain places, there were certain events that I'll remember for the rest of my life. And memories and stuff. But like in terms of excelling me forward in recovery and being positive, and not as much as those times were a positive memory, realistically they are very negative. I was self-harming and I was probably trying to kill myself subconsciously. But the gym is completely different. Like I was very shy as a kid. I was sort of outcasted, I would say, in school. Not like on purpose, but just I was very academic and I didn't really have much of a voice. And then the gym, even though I was on my own, because I learned to love myself, and that's where the journey of loving myself began, because I saw my body changing and I was like, I've always wanted what I look like now. So where can I go with it? And then got to a point where I was a bit too fat. So I was like, I might actually have to diet here. And I was like, because I was in a bodybuilding gym, this is where the whole idea of you should do a show. And well, actually, I wanted to be a powerlifter.
Right.
And then I was like, actually, I don't want to break my back trying to lift 200 kilos or something. So I then was like, you know what, bodybuilding can work. And with bodybuilding, though, comes massive discipline. So I wasn't really in routine with gym. It was sort of as and when I felt like it, a few times a week. But then with bodybuilding, you've got to get your meals in, you've got to get your water right,
There's
you've
a lot
got
of
to
preparation,
do your
isn't there?
plan, you know, fit everything around, get your sleep in all at the same time. And as a borderline, I don't like to sleep. I'm an insomniac at heart. So it was very interesting to actually go into that world, but then once I was in it, I was knee deep in it, and I'll be honest, I'll probably never come out.
Lovely.
I said it in my mini doc, I will bodybuild at 50 if I have to, like.
And I think finding your purpose and finding your calling is so important to then realise what is serving you and what doesn't.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of what I've been going through recently is certainly like you, I was into the alcohol, drugs, and there have been times where there've been amazing experiences, but you then have to realise, is that serving me? Is that right now going to benefit me? And if I have been diagnosed with depression, if I do have PTSD, if I do have borderline personality disorder, how is that going to mess me up?
Exactly,
how is that not only going to mess up my head, but from taking it and then the aftermath, but throwing me off my routine?
And also for me, like what I realised massively was the longevity. So the longevity of not just the high in the moment, but how long realistically can you keep that sort of a lifestyle up for? The funding of drugs is not cheap. It's not cheap. But even down from that to like traveling to run away from my problems and traveling to this event, that event, buying the tickets and it's like the money that I was putting into it, if I actually put that money into supplements, which I now do, for instance, like a nice vegan protein, which is actually quite nice, that is the same as a night out.
Yeah.
You know,
it's self-development for the benefit of yourself rather than, and again it's more long-term gains rather than short-term enjoyment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's been a very important lesson to learn, and a very difficult one, I must add as well.
It's not,
very
it's not
difficult
easy.
one.
It's like for me, I actually went sober, so I stopped drinking. I think it must have been 2017. Wow. I stopped drinking then, and I actually only broke sobriety in 2021. And I wasn't meant to break it, but it happened. And then obviously we came out of lockdown. About 6 months later, I went out with a friend for a night out, and I actually got very drunk, and it was very fun. And it's made me realise though that I can actually handle my drinking now. So before I was a very heavy drinker to the point of making myself sick every single time religiously, because I drank so much liquid like spirit on its own. And I was like, I'm literally 17, 18 and an alcoholic. Like, it was not good, but it happened. And I was lucky that I had my dad to support me and, like, look after me.
Amazing.
But the thing is that it was never going to work. Like, you can, let's be honest, like, you can mask how you feel and what someone does to you or what something does to you. But if you don't fix the problem, you're never going to feel okay,
and it's actually going to fester. It will always be there. And this has always been said with therapists that I've been involved with, psychiatrists, everyone, that facing your problems head on is the scariest thing to do. But the thing that will benefit you the most.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So I was bullied from year 4, first of all for having glasses and then just being academic, but I never really loved myself. And I was searching, after my attack, I didn't go out for about a year, I think it was. I started going out after about 9 months to a friend's house, and then after a few months of doing that, I actually went out again into public. And I would not be on my own for a long time. But then when I started to meet people, because of borderline, you might understand in terms of that we have high expectations. Like we feel so hard, so we love so hard, so we love to give to people, we love to, treat people how we want to be treated, and they won't return that.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking, what's wrong with me? And like, why am I feeling like this? Why is this person making me feel like this? And I realised that actually, and it was after my first boyfriend, he split up with me after a year and a half, and I'm like, what the hell do I do now? Like, why have you left me? You said you love me. And he was like, you need to work on yourself. Like, that was actually one of the things he said to me after a few months. He's like, you need to go and love yourself. Like, you feel so little for yourself that it was never going to work because you're so insecure.
And it actually so often happens that you find that because someone can't love themselves, they have to try and keep someone around next to them.
Yep.
To
You're constantly chasing.
Yeah.
And I find that it's a similar thing I've seen in some friends in domestic abuse relationships where they are constantly chasing their partner, and realistically that partner isn't actually looking after them in any way, shape or form. And I realised that with myself though, is that I would be chasing things, whether it was drugs, the high of being a rave, guys and relationships, even friends. And it's like, if I'm chasing that thing because that's what makes me happy, what am I going to do if that thing isn't there?
Isn't there, yeah.
I learned that with my first boyfriend. Then sadly in lockdown, I lost my best mate of 7 years, and I was absolutely heartbroken. I mean, at this point, I've been in recovery for 2 years. I've learned bodybuilding helps me. I've learned about my food, and I'm at a healthy weight. I physically couldn't eat for 6 weeks.
Really?
Yeah. So luckily, I only lost I think about 4 or 5 kilos, but I actually didn't eat for the first 4, and then I had a piece of toast every day, and that was one piece of toast. Wow. That's all I could stomach. But even in that moment, and this is another thing about the borderline feelings, I experienced grief from very, very small things, and people would say it's so you're overreacting and stuff, but they don't understand. I lost my cousin at 8 years old, and my cousin was like my brother, and as an only child,
yeah, of course,
that was a massive thing for me, because I was like, I'm going to grow up with him. He was only, I think, about 6 or 7 years older than me, whereas everyone else was about 15.
Right.
So he was
the closest relationship, yeah.
And I thought, you might be able to teach me about life more than my much older parents.
I mean, there are things that siblings and stuff will teach you that your parents won't.
Exactly.
So,
they used to teach me skateboarding, used to teach me jiu-jitsu, stuff like that. But I went through grief at a very early age in terms of understanding that someone's there and then they're not. And like, you can still love that person even though they're not here.
Yeah.
And
that's so beautiful.
When I lost, it's a real blessing in disguise, because when I lost Carlo, I was absolutely heartbroken. But I was like, do you know what? The one thing you can think of is he won't be in trouble anymore. Well, because he was always in trouble. Like, you have to kind of put your head to rest in terms of like, what's happened has happened. You can't do anything about it. But also like, for me, the main issue was just the shock. I used to see him literally once a week for 7 years, minimum once a week, if not 2-3 times a week. We'd just meet up for a coffee, chill. He'd take me to the station if I needed to, something like that. And that to me was real love. And he also, when I broke up with my first boyfriend, he was the one there, and he said, you need to sort your shit out, like pull your pants up and go get yourself out there. Like, learn to be on your own. Like, it's not that hard.
Learning to love yourself is one of probably the most important things for mental health.
Exactly, yeah.
For mental health as a whole.
And it's like when you're constantly chasing, in this world, in this day and age, in this society, everyone is chasing money. Everyone is chasing money, better living.
Status, image.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Higher shit. And realistically, I see so many people where they're chasing constantly. They don't seem to enjoy anything.
Yeah, they don't know. Well, they're so focused on an outcome or a goal that they skip the entire journey. They don't want to enjoy the journey or the road. They just want to be there, and that's why they feel so unfulfilled when they get to that point, because they feel like they missed it.
Yep, they've missed so much. Like, for instance, in prep, there was a lot that I didn't even miss out, because I didn't have a lot of social life compared to what I do now, and that was 2019. This was like pre-COVID, but you realise when you go through prep that there's a lot you miss out on. But in the bodybuilding world, there is your atypical hardcore bodybuilder that will have head down, get on with everything, have all their meals, they'll miss all the social life.
Yeah.
Then there's what I would like to say me, which is half in, half out. And then you've got the ones that sort of, it's a lifestyle, but it's not a competitive thing. They'll constantly, you know, miss their meals because they'd rather go out on their friends or whatever. Because for me, when I started bodybuilding, I said to myself, because I witnessed a lot of different things, I was like, do you know what? I've been through so much in my life. I am not capable of giving my entire life to bodybuilding.
Yeah.
I'm an insomniac for one. I'm impulsive for another. But,
The
like,
impulsivity is massive.
it's so
borderline, but-
horrible. Yeah, it was like last week when I was sick and I've got so much stuff going on. Yes, I ordered an Nando's. Like, it's not that bad, but it's not in my plan. You know, I had some days off training as well to rest, but it's like I said to myself, I'm a human first and foremost, a bodybuilder second. Like, bodybuilding saved my life, yes, but I want to enjoy my life.
Yeah.
And after so long of being like under a dark cloud and constantly feeling so bad, the main thing is like improving however I feel. And I've been through some bad stages. Like last year, there was a time where I went through a really tough time in a friendship group, and I was like, I feel like I'm in school again and I'm not in school. What the fuck am I doing? And it made me realise that it all led back to that one thing of loving yourself. And if I hadn't grasped that years ago, when that situation happened last year, I could have very much been like, I'm going to throw the towel in, you know. And you go back into that mindset of suicide because it's a blanket of safety in terms of like, once it's done, it's done. You don't have to
deal with anything else.
People don't understand that. I think suicide is so prevalent because of the fact that when you look at what the actual act is, you are finally ending all the hurt and pain that you feel. It's not that you're escaping it, you are ending it, be all and end all, you know. And
because in especially in that mind frame and mindset, that is the only way out. Like that
when you don't love yourself, you're not good enough, the world isn't helping you, nothing can help you. Like, you get so stuck in that mindset of there's no way out but this. But then when I realised even if I sit at home and I'm on my own, if I'm happy and I'm comfortable and I make myself laugh by watching shit on YouTube or, you know, random Disney movies or whatever, like, as long as I'm okay myself in my little world.
That's all that matters.
Exactly. And I think that I've also realised that in society there are two sides of society. There's society that understands me and there's the society that doesn't. The society that doesn't, I've noticed a lot of those people, they aren't that in tune with themselves. They're not in tune with spirituality, and by that I don't mean necessarily about spirits, but in terms of your spirit, your energy, protecting your energy, what you feed with your energy, whether that's your food, your environment, you know, your friends. There's so much more. So important. And I think that that's where a lot of people could work on just a little part of themselves. Whether it's inward, like how they are inwards or outwards.
And the trouble is, as much as you show someone, and I've been saying this saying so often.
You can't help someone who won't help themselves. You can't help someone who won't help themselves.
You can take the horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
It's
so you can tell someone that they need to work on themselves as much as you like.
I learned that.
Ultimately, it's down to them.
Yep. So I went through my own stuff, and then I had a friend who was in an abusive relationship, and I told her over and over, leave him, stop. Like, she was trying to kill herself every few weeks sometimes. I was running all the way to North London on a tube with no signal. By the time I got off, they'd sorted everything out. Jesus. But when I was back here, she was so upset. And I remember saying to her, like, you need to get out of this. You need to get out of this. You need to get out of this. She got out of it. She then got into another thing with someone else very similar. And I said, what are you doing? And then I realised I'm putting all this energy into someone who won't listen to me. And I wasn't speaking from experience, but I was speaking from a place of care and love and evidently seeing that something's wrong. And that's the nail on the head for me. It was like, you can't help someone who won't help themselves. And I also had to take that for myself.
Yeah.
Because I can't sit there and moan and complain about things if I'm then going to either A, ignore advice, or at least not try it, B, not try and figure it out for myself, or C, remove myself from the situation. You know, whether it would be a job, a friendship group, an environment. If it's not healthy for me, like my recent job, I'm gone.
Yeah.
If it got to a point where I'm not valued or recognised as doing my best, and I feel like I'm not doing enough because of what other people are making me feel like, even though I'm doing my absolute best and I'm doing my job as I should be, then, you know, I'm going to leave because my mental health is more important.
Exactly. 100%.
So
I think that's such a perfect thing to end on.
Exactly.
That's such a bad thing.
Yeah.
So before we go, just the last thing we like to do is, if there is one particular mindful technique or thing that you do to help be mindful, stay present, what would that be?
I think it's so simple, but it's something I really struggle with. But breathing, like sometimes I would be running around, like I'll train and then I'll go straight on my shift with no break in between, and I wouldn't have a moment to breathe until I got home, which would have been 12 hours later by the time it's finished. And I'm like, I need to, like, I would be so worn out, and it's like if I'd just taken 5 minutes between training and work to recoup and get myself back in a state of like, okay, we're cool, then, you know, it's better. But like, I've noticed the days that I don't think about breathing or like how I'm even breathing myself, like I've noticed there's times that I genuinely don't actually breathe. I'm so like anxious, I'm just like tight.
Yeah.
And if I'd taken a second to be like, relax, you know, take a breath.
Yeah, step back.
Yeah, and look back on it, and then I'd be like, okay, I'm better than I, you know, and recognizing when you're doing better than you were. Like me last year compared to now, so much has happened, but I know for a fact that I would be handling things a lot better now than I was last year. Self-reflection.
Amazing.
Definitely.
Thank you so much. Thank
so
you.
good. Oh man.
And thank you all for watching and listening. And we'll see you next time on Sully's Open Conversation. Goodbye.